What's happening, Saints fans? Welcome into another edition of Saints Now by Chat Sports. As always, I'm your host, Trace Girouard. Thank you so much for tuning in, no matter where you are, how you're watching. We appreciate the Who Dat Nation for taking a few minutes to hang out with us and learn about the black and gold. We're going to dive into some wide receiver options for the New Orleans Saints. There is no question about it. There is no doubt in my mind. And if you want to argue with me, get in the comment section. Wide receiver is a massive, arguably, in my opinion, one of the biggest needs for the New Orleans Saints this offseason. And in case you disagree, well, I'm going to go ahead and blow your mind here. The New Orleans Saints had one player have more than 500 receiving yards. Do you see who that is? Juwan Johnson. He's a tight end. Now, obviously, the Saints, they were missing Chris Olave for a good amount of time. He finished the season. Actually, I take it back. There's two players who had 500 receiving yards. Alvin Kamara and Juwan Johnson. So two players had 500 receiving yards or more. It was a tight end and a running back. Saints need wide receivers. No doubt about it. Really quick, I'm going to get you updated on the 2025 sub battle. We're kicking the Falcons today, channels, but our lead over 100. Let's double it, though. Let's get to 200. Let's get a 200 sub lead on these frauds Falcons today. The more subs we get, the more videos you get. So hit the sub button, lock us in, and let's bury the baby brothers of the NFC South. All right, we're going to dive into some a trade option, free agency, and draft. This is the biggest one of the day. DK Metcalf has requested a trade on Wednesday, March 5th. So in my opinion, the Saints absolutely must do their due diligence by at least making a call to the Seattle Seahawks. I'm not saying go ahead and make the trade, but make a call and see what it's going to cost you. Worth noting, if you do trade for DK Metcalf, you're likely going to have to give him a little bit of extra money on the back end because he's, in the last year of his deal. Now, DK this past season, shockingly, less than 1,000 yards, still much better than anything the Saints had this past year. And at 6'4", 235 pounds, I'll tell you right now, this is exactly what the New Orleans Saints need. They need a player like DK Metcalf. They need a guy who is dominant, who's big-bodied, who's an alpha receiver, who can get the contested catches over the middle. He can be a downfield threat. You got to get a guy who fits the size profile and the role of a DK Metcalf, because ever since Michael Thomas has started dealing with those injuries, you haven't had a guy like that. And I'll tell you right now, I don't love the wide receiver group in free agency. This class, it's old. It's not very talented. It's a lot of players who, even if you do want to go get them, they're probably going to cost you a lot of money. I just think when it comes down to it, these are probably the options that I would give you. Granted, not every one of these is a great option, but Davante Adams, Tyler Lockett, Christian Kirk, they were recently made available as free agents. D-Hop has decided to retire from the National Football League, so he's off the board, but maybe Stefon Diggs, maybe Amari Cooper. My only problem, there's one guy on here who's under the age of 30, and that's Christian Kirk, who last season had less than 400 yards receiving and only one touchdown. And look, Davante Adams, he's probably the best option in those free agency options, and I think Stefon Diggs is a good football player too. Missed some time with the Texans due to injuries. I could see him returning to Houston. He was pretty good for C.J. Stroud in the limited time. I will never forgive the Minneapolis Miracle, but I'll tell you what, he's a good football player. And, maybe go Amari Cooper. Maybe go Tyler Lockett. These are all options. I do know the Raiders are interested in Tyler Lockett, especially with that Pete Carroll connection, but Saints need to add a wide receiver. And I showed you this because I wanted to prove the point. It's not very exciting in free agency. So DK Metcalf, trade might make some sense. But then you also have the draft that you could possibly address the wide receiver group. And then there's also a guy like MVS out there. So, there's options. I think the Saints need to add wide receivers. I think they honestly need to add more than one. But what do you think? How many wide receivers would you add if you're the GM or if you're Kellen Moore? How many wide receivers, how many pass catchers are you bringing on to the depth chart? I'm saying you got to at least add 2 or 3. Bare minimum. You have to add probably 1 cheap free agent and 2 in the draft. That's my opinion. I also will say this, when it comes down to the New Orleans Saints, I think that they have to acknowledge the fact that they need players, they need talent, they need guys who will be productive. However, I also don't think that the Saints need to draft a wide receiver round 1, you can go and get a guy in any round. And here we're going to show you some players to possibly look at. Ted McMillan, Trey Harris, Jaden Higgins, Jack Besh, Savion Williams are all options. And one big commonality between all of the players on your screen. All of these guys here have a very nice size profile. All of these guys here are bigger than what the New Orleans Saints have on the roster. All of those guys are big-bodied, 6 foot plus, can win contested catches, can win over the middle, at least have more size than what is available for the New Orleans Saints. I'm going to tell you more about those draft targets, but really quick, if you guys want to get a really sick cup, pool season's almost here. It's still pretty cold, so you can still have some hot cocoa or some coffee. Go get this cup. It's $10. It's sick. You got the crawfish saying we're boiling hot. Absolutely fresh. Chatsports.com/Saints Cup. The link is available in the comments and description of this video. I highly encourage you to check it out. Really, really good stuff available at Fanatics. $10? Yeah, sign me up for that. So let's go back to the draft targets. Now, Ted McMillan, he's a guy you're going to have to go round 1. And I've started to see mock drafts where he's falling past the Saints pick. And I'll tell you, if he's available at 9, it's very hard for me to not sprint up to the stage with my draft card that says Teteroa McMillan, wide receiver out of Arizona. But I love the idea of Trey Harris in round 2 or 3. I also think Jaden Higgins could be a really good option for the New Orleans Saints. But what about bringing home Jack Besh? He's from Louisiana. That would be a really cool story and a really cool homecoming for him. And he's also a damn good football player. And Savion Williams, same thing, really talented player. The production doesn't jump off the screen, but, I mean, look at how much Jack Besh did. That's pretty electric. The Saints need size. The Saints need girth. The Saints need width. I tried to make that as giggity as possible, trying to have some fun here. But the Saints, truly, they do need size. They don't need speed. You have speedsters. You have burners. You have guys who are very fast and a little bit smaller. I mean, literally, nobody on the roster is taller than 6'4". Sure, maybe that's me asking for a lot, but MVS is the tallest guy on the wide receiver group last year, and he's not on the roster right now. He's not under contract. So, in terms of players you have under contract, Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Cedric Wilson, Bub Means, Mason Tipton, and Kevin Austin Jr. None of those players are taller than 6'2". None of those players weigh more than 220 pounds. None of those players fit the size profile of what the New Orleans Saints are missing. Bub Means, maybe. He can get there. He actually has very shockingly similar in terms of size and athleticism as Michael Thomas. But you got to see him stay on the field. You got to see him stay healthy, and you got to see him put up production. And my point being, the Saints need to lead the draft with multiple wide receivers. I don't think you draft one and you're good. I think you have to draft multiple. You have a lot of picks actually in the top 150. Use a couple of them on wide receiver. Like, genuinely, we saw once again what happens to the Saints when you don't have depth and when you get the injury bug. It's happened before when Traquan Smith was wide receiver 1. Now we had a free agent MVS become wide receiver 1. We got to get better. We have to get better in the wide receiver group. So I want you to name a wide receiver that the Saints should add. Draft, free agency, trade, I don't care. Name a wide receiver the Saints should bring in to the roster, and I want you to show how much ball knowledge you got. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Y'all stay golden. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and we will see you next time.